And so when the system, the so-called system, breaks down like this, who do we blame? Well, in the end, it's government. Federal, state, local government are all culpable here. That much is clear. They are guilty of letting down the students and their parents, not only from a public safety perspective, but from a moral perspective. After all, this fundamental breakdown of teaching and protecting children, basic values, began decades ago. And only now we are witnessing the results of this radical, amoral shift unfold right now, real time. Joining me now from St. Louis, Missouri, business strategist and entrepreneur evangelist, Josh Tolley. Josh, I want to talk about Scott Peterson. I don't blame him. I really don't. And I really try not to cast aspersions here when at all possible. I blame the people who put him in this situation that he clearly couldn't handle. Why in the world would his superiors put him in a position like this? The guy was even told that this guy Cruz was a potential threat months and months ago, and now we have this, and now he does show in a cowardly way his soul. He retires, without going through the process, without letting the process unfold, without letting the sheriff investigate what happened. Now he's retired. It's a breakdown in the system to me. It's a breakdown in what many of these people in Broward County are calling for, which is more government. They want more layers of government when clearly all these layers, from the FBI to local police to social workers to this campus cop, all of them broke down.
Well, absolutely. And Graham, what we're seeing there is indicative of the larger problem that we're facing across the country. This guy is going to be haunted with this decision for the rest of his life. And sadly, I would not be that surprised if his life was shortened because of his own decision. I could not imagine living with myself knowing that the decision I didn't make led to the death of 17 other people, and I was sent there to do it. But it was fear that stopped him, this lack of morality. Right. We used to have a generation of men who would charge into situations like this. For goodness sakes, the greatest generation, they lied about their age at 15 years old in order to go to war. This guy, he was paid to be there, and he chickened out, and I don't know how he can live with himself.
All right, I want to go to the bigger picture, and we've talked about it on this program, but we haven't really circled back, but I want to circle back with you on this. We've always had guns in this country since the inception, since the revolution. That's obvious. But we haven't always had this shoot-up schools problem. This is recent. This is in the last few decades. And so we have to trace it back and figure out the genesis, why this is occurring relatively recently. Well, it seems rather obvious to me. We can trace it back to the 1960s, 1970s, when the liberals, the fascist left, I call them, started taking over the school system and removing basic fundamental values from the classroom, from the school. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And we lost that morale, that moral fiber. But worst of all, we've allowed it to happen. We've seen this coming for now 40 or 50 years. And the conservative side, the Christian side, they just kind of said, well, someday something will happen. If we elect the right person, somebody will fix this. But it has to get fixed at home. We have to say we are going to live a moral life again. And unfortunately, most of us don't want to. We expect the schools to do it for us, and then this is what we see.
I'm going to use a term, humanism. I think you know what I'm talking about when I use the term humanism. Here's a definition. It's a rough definition. If you look it up, an outlook or system of thought attaching prime importance to human rather than divine or supernatural matters. Humanist beliefs stress the potential value and goodness of human beings, emphasize common human needs, and seek solely rational ways of solving human problems. Sounds great. Sounds wonderful. Unfortunately, what this is saying, without saying it, is removing God. And our culture has chosen to take steps in the humanist direction rather than the godly direction. And this is the opposite of the founding of this country. Our country was founded on Judeo Christian values which emphasize individual salvation.
Right.
Humanism is the opposite.
Well, not only that, it kind of inverts the priorities that our founding fathers had. Life was not the leading priority. They risked life for the other priorities. Today, it's the other way around. Our founding fathers were willing to die for privacy. Today, we go to the airport and get naked because we don't want to die. Our founding fathers were willing to die to fight a 3% tax. Today, with all the other taxes above and beyond income tax, we're taxed 40 to 45%. We have placed life, well, as long as I stay alive, privacy doesn't matter, invasion of my home doesn't matter, seeing me naked at the airport doesn't matter, just somebody keep me alive. Keep the guns away from me, keep the children in a little box, and that's not what the founders wanted, and that's why there's such a ripping apart of the country right now.
And so I want to circle back to what you said about Christians and people who say they are Christians in this country. They're not speaking up. They're not saying, hey, wait a minute, let's back up here and see where we made this left turn, literally, a left turn in this country as it pertains to school, that we need to possibly put back into the classroom God, in this case, I think, in this society now, guns, and the Constitution. It's time for Christians to stand, and Jews, and whoever, people of faith, it doesn't matter. Stand up and say to these school boards, enough is enough. We need to have this infused back into our society. I'm very, very leery that this is going to happen. When you see the knee-jerk reaction that we're seeing out of Florida right now, where they're blaming guns, guns, and only guns, they're not tracing it back to the problem. We are not teaching about God and the moral foundation of this country. We are not teaching about why the Second Amendment exists, and largely we're not teaching about the United States Constitution. And you connecting the dots there of what the framers of the Constitution were all about.
Well, that's exactly it, because we look at homes today where we raise children, but really we don't teach them how to think. And that's kind of really a role we've abdicated. We've turned raising into keeping alive until they turn 18. Just keep them alive. I'm not going to impose my religion or my morals on them. Well, that leads them to a place where they have no framework. And when a kid has no framework and they're left to make up their own morals, they make up no morals, because that's the root of humanism. Serve yourself. And that's exactly what we've seen in every school shooting. And if we go back to Columbine, for goodness sakes, it's been, 20-some years now. When we look at Columbine, you have a situation where they want to talk about the drugs they were on. Good. They want to talk about the mental health that they had. Great. But let's talk about the fact that we are raising families to not be together. We cannot have a 50+ divorce rate, 50+% divorce rate, and not think that that has something to do with it. We can't have more kids than ever raised without a father and not think that has something to do with it. For goodness sakes, when you were going to school, when I was going to school, guns were allowed in school. Now, there's not a gun organization out there, NRA, GOA, that's advocating for guns coming back to school. So even in our conservative position, we've all moved to the left because we have given up the morality, and instead we're just trying to treat this with conservative policy, and that'll never work.
And people scoff and they laugh when we talk about on this program and elsewhere about how Christianity is being marginalized in this country, especially around Christmas. And you look at the commercials, and they don't use the word Christmas ever. It's now holiday this, holiday tree, holiday party. What happens on December 25th exactly? Well, it's called Christmas, yet we, the people, many people, I refuse to participate in that. I say Merry Christmas. When people say Happy Holidays to me, I look them straight in the eyeballs and I say Merry Christmas. And if they're Jewish, Happy Hanukkah. And that's what we need to do in this country as members of the Judeo-Christian foundation of this country.
You are absolutely right. And, we see people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and this Harvard professor saying, well, where was God in this? My question is why did we take God out?
Right.
When you look at the mass shootings we had in schools when we had God, how many were there? And then they want to talk about how we have more today. Well, just a logical thinking adult who's able to tie their own shoes and feed themselves would say, hey, wait a second, what has shifted between the 1940s and 50s and today? We've gotten rid of God and we've gotten rid of morals. So if you really want to treat this problem, it's not the gun that changed. We had guns then, we have guns now. We had schools then, we had schools now. We had God then, oh, we don't have God now. And if you really want to get to the root of the problem, that's it. But they don't want to go to the root.
And now is the time for parents to literally storm, I mean in a nice way, storm school boards and say this is it. Now we need to go back to the fundamentals. This is the problem. We need to restore guns, sorry, in the classroom, but we have to. We have to restore the Second Amendment. You can call it physically or philosophically, it doesn't matter. We've got to restore God, guns, and the Constitution in these schools, or we are never going to get out of this death spiral. Josh, thank you.